Hi there, I'm Susan. Welcome back to my channel, Canines First. Today's video is going to give you my best tips for housebreaking. There are two parts to housebreaking. One part is your dog wanting to go outside to relieve itself, and the second part is the dog knowing how to ask. I have made a separate video for you on the way I teach the dogs how to ring the bells to let us know they'd like to go outside. Right now, I want to focus on that first part, which is the habit forming part. Under habit forming, you've got one rule that you've got to follow, and that rule is supervise or confine. That's it. If you can master that rule, you can housebreak your dog, but you've got to follow it to the letter. Now let's define our terms. For the purpose of housebreaking, confinement is defined as any space where your dog can remain and it be deterred from using the restroom. So typically we think of a crate when we think of confinement. And I made 3 videos for you on crating that you can check out if you need to bone up on crating tips. The crate will give us the confinement that we need that's small enough to deter the dog from using the restroom. Because as you probably know, dogs don't usually like to use the restroom where they are sleeping, hanging out, playing, eating, and drinking, if it's small enough. And at the same time, the crate will keep the dog safe and teach him to wait until someone can tend to him before he relieves himself. Anytime you can't be with your dog, keep them in confinement in as such that confinement will deter them from using the restroom. Oftentimes people will like to baby gate their dog in the kitchen or the bathroom or any other room, and they find that it's just not enough. The dog will use the restroom in one part of that room and then hang out in another part of that room. So I really want to encourage you to use the crate for this process. Okay, now let's talk about supervision. This is where people usually get tripped up. They think that being in the same home with the dog is supervising, but it's not in the case of housebreaking. Supervision requires that you be directly looking at your dog in order to supervise them. It is very difficult to multitask and supervise your dog at the same time.
Having your dog hang out with you on your sofa or your bed is somewhere in between supervising or confining, and it counts.
When you're supervising them, you can pick up on those little clues that let you know the dog needs to go to the restroom. That could be the spinning or the sniffing, the whining, the just appearing stressed, simply waking up for a nap, or zoomies coming to an end. Those are all times to take your dog outdoors. And speaking of supervision, you can't send your dog out without going with them as well. This is a critical part to housebreaking. When you go with them, you are fixing all kinds of problems that can crop up. Dogs, particularly puppies, don't like to be alone, particularly when it's a new place and it's dark outside. So I want you to go ahead and hold their hand and go out there with them. You'll get rid of their nerves and you'll be there to see what it is that they're going to do. They're going to do number 1, number 2. You need to take note of all these things. If they get to chewing on something or otherwise distracted, you can redirect them and get them thinking about their bladder and their bowels again, just by getting them off the thing that has their attention. I'm going to give you some tips on supervising your dog out of doors when you've gone with them to use the restroom. Tip number 1 is don't stand by the back door and act annoyed. Go out to the middle of the yard, sit down. If you don't have anything to sit on, you can lean against a fence. But I think you get the point. What I'm trying to tell you is give your dog the impression that you're not trying to sneak around and run back in, that you're not annoyed or in a hurry, so they can relax and they can notice their bladder and their bowels. Tip number 2, if something is distracting them, see if you can't remove it or somehow distract them from the thing that is distracting them and get them moving around again so that they can, once again, notice their bladder and their bowels. And tip number 3 is take your watch or take your phone and notice what time it is when you go out there, because a couple of minutes can feel like an hour or vice versa. I want you to give them at least 5 minutes and then ask yourself, do they look like they need another 5 more? If the answer is yes, It won't hurt anything to stay out there for 5 more minutes. A lot of times my clients complain to me, well, he did his business and then we went inside and he did his business again. And I believe that is because they're puppies and they've got more to give than we realize, or they've got more to give than they realize. So even if they went number 1 and they went number 2 and you're like, great, that only took 2 minutes, go ahead and stay out there with them a few more minutes and see if they have anything else to give. And speaking of timing, I want to slip in a little bit of information in regards to the frequency that you need to be taking your dog out. Everybody would like a black and white rule of every half hour, every 2 hours. They want to ask me, how often should I be taking this dog out? To which I say, I wish I could give you a straight answer, but instead of focusing on hitting that every half hour or 1 hour or 2 hour mark, instead, I want you to consider the biology of it all. Meaning, how long has it been? Has it been 2 hours, but he has slept the whole time and now he's awake? Go ahead and get him out. Or did he just drink a bowl of water 20 minutes ago? You better get him out. If he just ate, you better get him out. I don't like the wait 20 minutes rule before you take them out in regards to feeding, by the way. I like to take them out as soon as they've eaten, particularly when they're young. You can get away with that, less so when they're older, but when they're young, their body's telling them it's time to move. So as soon as you feed them, get them out. First thing in the morning, get them out. And by the way, here's an additional tip. When they're little, carry them first thing in the morning to the potty spot. They cannot help it. They're not trying to be jerks on purpose to pee in the hallway or in the elevator or on their way down the stairs. They just can't help it. But if you hold them and distract them from it by holding them, then you can prevent a lot of those accidents first thing in the morning. My clients are always confused as to why their dog can hold it 8 hours at night, but they can't hold it 30 minutes during the day. And the simple answer is, it's because they're sleeping. You don't notice your bladder unless it's extremely urgent in the middle of the night. But when you wake up in the morning, you notice it. So it's really not a mystery at all. They're not consuming and they're in that state of sleep, so they don't have an accident typically. But during the day, there's so much less predictability depending on how much they have taken in and whether or not they just finished an activity. When they're active, or better word perhaps is distracted, they're not going to notice it. So if they're training or they're playing with a friend or playing with some toys or chewing on a bone, they don't notice it. But when that activity finishes, you better go ahead and get them to the restroom. And as we wrap things up, I'd like to pepper you with some do's and some don'ts. My first don't for you is please don't use pee pads or litter boxes unless you want to use that for the rest of your dog's life. Whatever you teach them early, particularly with housebreaking, is likely to stick with them for the rest of their life. So if you don't just simply follow my rules, you're not going to need those pee pads or that litter box. My next don't for you is please don't scold or punish. They don't understand our desires about where they put their pee-pee and their poo-poo. They're not doing it to get back at you. Scolding or punishing will really only cause you more problems. A couple of do's I already mentioned was to carry them in the morning. And the other do is to have a second crate handy so you can put them in there when you're cleaning up the mess. Because if you put them outside while you clean up a mess, you're likely to go outside and find another problem. And our last one is a don't, and that is don't put others in charge that aren't up to the task. You might have wanted this to be a family project, but at some point you've just got to be reasonable and realize you're the only one that seems to be able to master this. So just go ahead and take it upon yourself for your sanity and for the dog. I'd like to do my part in dispelling a couple of myths. And that first one is that you need the tiniest crate ever in order to housebreak your dog. And I just find that that is not true. That a crate that is appropriate size is going to be enough to deter your dog. You don't need to make it precisely the size of their body where they can't even turn around. A 24-inch or a 30-inch crate is small enough to deter almost every dog from using the restroom, regardless of their breed. This is the size of puppy. I'm not talking about adult dogs, but any puppy can do with the 24 or 30-inch crate. You don't need to make it smaller. That is something I save as an absolute last resort. And the reason I save it as a last resort is because it only works to make sure our dogs don't like a crate if we're cramming them in there. And the other myth is that you shouldn't take your dog out too often. While I might suggest that to people when we're further down the road on housebreaking, I don't think that's necessary in the beginning. I say the first couple of weeks at least. I don't care if you take them out 100 times. You can't take them out there too much. What you're working on is a percentage. You make a game out of it. You want to try to hit 100%. You get the pee-pee and the poo-poo in the grass. And so if you take them out very frequently, you're likely to win that game. I hope you found all this information helpful. Please pass it on to someone you think that can use it. Thank you for watching. Please hit the like button and the subscribe button, and I will see you next time when we're going to go over all of the things that you need when you first get a dog.
And as always, I want to encourage you to make your dog as happy as possible every day.